Sunday is Sunday to my family. But Sunday is not simply Sunday for me. For Sunday's the one day when I love to see the funnies.
Comic book movies! Comic book movies! Comic book movie! Comic book movie! What is the up, YouTube fam? My name's Cly Clegalrin. Nope, that's not it. My name's Kyle Calgren. I have been a YouTuber for way too long, and we're gonna talk about comic book movies. Now, I love comics. What is this character I'm doing? I love all the comics characters. I love Superman, Batman, Iron Man, Spider-Man, Power Man, Woman Man, Man, etc. Now, we all know Hollywood makes a lot of comic book movies. Comic book movies! I'm gonna be saying comic book movies a lot. Wow. I really don't want to have to say comic book movie in its entirety through the whole thing, so comic book movies. Sebum. Sebum is actually kind of good and natural, you know. Now, sebum is naturally produced by the sebaceous gland, and in a healthy industry, sebum will spread out across the surface evenly, creating a slightly acidic mantle, which serves to protect the industry from poverty. Certain hormones, testosterone in particular, can increase the production of sebum. It should be noted that it's normal and healthy to see sebum on your screens, and it can be tempting to pick at it, but when dirt or debris blocks an opening, or the industry gets irritated by excessive picking, that leads to the sweat of labor getting trapped on the surface while the gland keeps producing sebum. This can produce what dermatologists will call a, pustule. And today, we're gonna be counting down the top 20 comic book movies of all time. That is the sound of a New York City subway that I live by. If you want to help me move out of a place with less ambient noise, consider supporting me on Patreon so I can move to a place that's not by a subway station. Now, there are comic book characters and there are comic book characters, and this is one of the all-time great comic book characters. Famous manskank Warren Beatty had this huge passion project to bring Dick Tracy to the screen, and he did it a lot. There's so much going on in this movie. Not only the ambitious makeup,
well, little face.
Not only are the costumes on point, the sets are painted with the colors that were used in the print comic. But it really is such a wild, stacked cast. I mean, not just Warren Beatty as Dick Tracy. Al Pacino is the villain, and he's utterly unhinged.
Wait. I'm having a thought. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I'm gonna have a thought. It's coming. It's gone.
Even Madonna as Breathless Mahoney is perfectly cast. I mean, Charles Durning's in it, Kathy Bates is in it, Dick Van Dyke is in it, Dustin Hoffman is in it. Stephen Sondheim wrote a song for this movie. Stephen Sondheim. And it's not only sung by Madonna, but by Mandy Patinkin.
Baby, you're mine on a platter, I always get.
I'm considering this a reunion of Sunday in the Park with George. Dick Tracy is one of the original comic book heroes, one of the original comic books. Dick Tracy had his comics debut on October 4th, 1931 in the Chicago Tribune New York News Syndicate. And Chester Gould, who created him, drew him until 1977. This is a huge part of popular culture. And Dick Tracy remains popular. So why haven't I seen any other movies that aren't the Dick Tracy by Warren Beatty? That is because Warren Beatty has been sitting on the rights to make Dick Tracy content since the 90s. Every so often, he just appears on TCM in character as Dick Tracy just to maintain the rights to the comic book character.
Hey, we're all technocrats now. Look at us. We're on Zoom. We're on Zoom all the time. You know, I used to think that the high point of technology would be my wristwatch radio. I tell you, we
Feeling a little inadequate?
Rachel Rachel Talele's Tank Girl was based on the comic of the same name, which first debuted in 1988, written by Alan Martin, who still writes Tank Girl, and drawn by Jamie Hewlett, who would go on to create the main characters for the band Gorillaz. And you can see Jamie Hewlett's art in the movie itself. This is a very literal comic book movie. These are actually done by the graphic artist himself as storyboards for the movie, and honestly, it kind of adds this level of intermedium play that is a lot of fun to just, hang out in. And Lori Petty. Lori Petty's a star. How can you not watch this movie and just think Lori Petty is an absolute star? I loved her in Orange is the New Black. I've loved her in Station 11. So much of the 90s riot girl aesthetic has so many sources that I can't possibly name all of them, but you cannot tell me that Lori Petty didn't walk so Margot Robbie could run. I mean, it's all there. Lori Petty just is this character, and she brings such an infectious energy that she carries the whole movie with her. Even Malcolm McDowell's a lot of fun. Malcolm McDowell as a villain who just goes around sucking dudes dry. I did not phrase that well. Or did I? There are main characters who are mutant kangaroos. One of them is played by Ice-T, and he plays it as seriously as a heart attack. I mean, he just shows up to set, I'm playing a kangaroo. I am the most serious kangaroo on the face of planet f***ing Earth.
I say we get crumpets and tea.
Crumpets and tea. All in favor of crumpets and tea, say aye.
Aye. Shut up. Ain't gonna be no crumpets and tea. We're gonna take them outside right now and waste them.
He's the kangaroo who's there to get the other kangaroos to get their shit together. He's getting them to hop to it. Okay, not only does Ice-T play a mutant kangaroo, he wrote a track for the movie. And of course it f***ing slaps. Taste their own medicine, light them up like Con Edison? I mean, legend. Legend. And it's still just so anarchic and joyous. Tank Girl essentially invades Epstein Island and then forces all the Johns there to a dance number at gunpoint. Based. Also, it's so good that this is directed by a woman, because just the use of the female gaze is breathtaking in this film.
Hello, dear.
Hello, love. Did you have a nice morning, dear?
Oh, all right, thanks. Rather uneventful. My life isn't very fast-moving or dynamic.
Well, you are retired, James.
When the Wind Blows is based on the graphic novel by Raymond Briggs, who is best known in the UK for his children's book, The Snowman, which was turned into a classic Christmas special.
Don't start singing. What do you mean we'll all go together when we go? It's not funny.
Actually, it's here. Oh, I have it here. It's very old and fragile, and hold up. It's here. Is this visual metaphor too on the nose? The fact that I have to get it out from this huge, heavy stack of Marvel to see it? Am I being too obvious? This is good content. Ugh. Okay. When the Wind Blows by Raymond Briggs is so deceptively wholesome and kind.
For God's sake, shut up!
Oh dear, I've left the oven on.
Get in!
The cake will be burned.
The story is about a couple, the Blogs, who lived through World War II and are about to live through World War III. This is not Fallout. This is not a big fantasy about what you would do in a post-apocalyptic wasteland. This book is about watching your parents survive an apocalyptic wasteland.
But the blessed bomb has gone off already.
Yes, but the fallout is falling out now, see?
No, I don't see. I can't see any soppy fallout.
It is animated by, let me put you back in your proper place. The movie was animated by Jimmy Murakami, whose best-known work in comic book movies would be the opening to Heavy Metal.
We must do the correct thing, dear. We must remain in the inner core or refuge. Ours not to reason why, ours but to, something or other.
Do or die. The rest of that poem is do or die. I don't know if they realize that it is a rough watch. I know it can be a hard watch to see, people that you are very quickly falling in love with make all the worst mistakes and get caught up in things that they cannot possibly understand. We all lived through COVID. We are going to live through multiple genocides after this. There's so much in the world going on right now that it's impossible to keep up with every possible thing, and...
Still, it'll be lovely in the spring.
It is spring, dear.
They were gonna kill us. They were gonna kill us. And if it weren't for Tom, he's the hero.
A History of Violence by John Wagner and Vince Locke was first published in 1997 under Paradox Press, which was later reprinted under Vertigo Press. Both of these are imprints of DC Comics. Apparently David Cronenberg had no idea the story was connected to a comic when he started making it, and ultimately didn't care that it was connected to a comic, and he doesn't really need to. So yeah, it's not based on a comic, it's based on a graphic novel, but the line between comics and graphic novels was always a marketing term, which are still published by the big companies under a special kind of branding, so they are separate from the DC universe. But still, A History of Violence is very much in conversation with superhero stories. I mean, cities plagued with crime, a reluctant hero who is not part of the law but is nonetheless friendly with it, secret identity.
My name is Tom.
Joey Cusack. Your name is Joey Cusack.
And these are all the same artists, all the same writers. John Wagner, who wrote the comic A History of Violence with Carlos Esquerra, co-created the character of Judge Dredd. It's still all the same industry. It's still all the same artists and writers and publishers doing the same things. It's just that the market demands these massive media campaigns for their best-selling titles.
When I saw History of Violence, I didn't know this was based on anything. I didn't know it was adapted from a novel, or especially didn't know it was adapted from comic books and a graphic novel. I just saw it as a movie itself, so it didn't have to live up to anything. It didn't have to overcome anything.
It's funny that the writer of Romeo and Juliet should say that. It implies that familiarity with the source material is an ingrained part of watching a comic book adaptation. And he's not wrong. From the beginning, comics companies have used continuity and crossover to disguise synergy. National Allied Publications ran Detective Comics, Action Comics, and More Fun Comics, and then buying out All American Comics, Fawcett Comics, Charlton Comics, Wildstorm, and a bunch of other titles I'm sure I'm forgetting. And that's not including the imprints they started to market to mature readers, imprints like Vertigo. And even in imprints, they used crossovers to boost readership. As much as I loved the Netflix adaptation of The Sandman, shame they couldn't get away with adapting the comic's prominent cameo by the Martian Manhunter. Paradox Press itself was one such imprint. It mostly failed commercially, so later editions of A History of Violence were published under Vertigo. So now I'm just imagining a version of this movie where Tom Stahl gets a surprise visit from John Constantine. It's a great film. Please watch it. It's a DC comic. This next movie is about one of the most powerful figures in the popular imagination. Someone who's had worlds balance on their shoulders. One of the most significant, certainly strongest characters to ever enter the popular imagination. The Man of Steel himself.
Joseph Vissarionovich Stalin, you have betrayed our nation and destroyed its people. I pray for your end and ask the Lord to forgive you. Tyrant.
Stal is Russian for steel. And he changed it to Stalin to be like his boss, who was more popular than him.
Should we investigate?
Should you shut the up before you get us both killed.
The Death of Stalin was based on a graphic novel by Terry Robin and Fabian Nuri about the real-life death of Joseph Jugashvili, who changed his name to Stalin because it made him sound strong. Stalin sucked so much. So many of the advancements of the Soviet Union can be placed on the scientists and soldiers and engineers that actually worked and created those things in the Soviet Union and do not need to go to the credit of the strong man at the head of it. That is my political statement. In fact, that's kind of the thesis of this whole movie. Cults of personalities around strong men really suck. They suck to live under, they suck to maintain, and when that strong man becomes so very not strong, as all people will, as we are all mortal after all the people trying to gather up the strength that they had given away to this jerk who took over their lives is a farce of legendary proportions.
What's he? It's a painting. It's the painting. He's pointing at the painting.
Hold on, you know what he's saying? He is saying, I am the lamb.
Huh?
I am the lamb, and you, my children, have given me life.
Yeah. Or the lamb is the people, and the milk is socialism.
Maybe he's the milk.
Maybe you're the tit.
Now, Armando Iannucci, who directed this film, has been doing political satire his entire career. I need to find the article about the Washington staffers who said that the most realistic depiction of what it's like to work in global geopolitics in Washington, D.C. was not the Aaron Sorkin show. It was not the Shondaland show. It was the Armando Iannucci show.
We have to issue a statement.
All right, well, standard issue, pro-Israeli, pro-Palestinian, but subtly more pro-Israeli statement. I mean, hit F9 and print that out.
No, this needs to be top-notch. This needs to be the Gettysburg Address of tightrope walking, say nothing bullshit.
The thing that I love about Armando Iannucci's work is that he does not make shows or movies about leaders. He makes them about people who are trying to be leaders, who are trying to perform the role of leader, and who are nonetheless human like everyone else.
Swap.
No.
Just swap with me.
I said no.
We can make it look like it's part of the ceremony.
What the f*** are you doing?
I mean, these people have massive titles and huge, elaborate uniforms and all of the weight of the world on their very tiny, very weak shoulders, and they are breaking under the pressure. And it is hilarious to watch from the perspective of several decades, a cold country, and the mirror of fiction.
I'm going to have to report this conversation. Threatening to do harm or obstruct any member of the Presidium in the process of looking at your face.
The Death of Stalin is a farce that gets funnier every time I see it, and it really is a hilarious comedy of manners about what people will do to maintain their superpowers. There's certainly a class of comic book nerd that does not like it when we talk about how superpowers are in fact real and are governing our lives every single day. My voice is more powerful than a locomotive! Next on the list, number 15. Now this next one is a classic. You all know it. A vigilante clad in black armor stalks the night, fighting crime as he's tormented by a charismatic, mysterious figure in purple and green, who can't help but leave you wondering just how he got those scars. Ichi the Killer. I've seen Ichi the Killer before. I rewatched it for this video, and I got about 8 minutes in before I had to take a very, very long break when I remembered that, oh yeah, my life on this earth is finite, and I need to take care of the soft animal that is my body and the soft tissue that is my brain. And so, after a very long mental health break, I went back to the movie, finished it. Takashi Miike, if you've seen Takashi Miike's Audition, the last half of that movie is his normal working mode. If you've seen Takashi Miike's The Happiness of the Katakuris, you might be entitled to financial compensation. If you've seen Ichi the Killer... Can we talk? Do you want to just, like, sit? I mean, we don't have to say anything. You know, just... I can hold space for you. We can all hold space for those of us who watched Ichi the Killer. I cannot show you the title card of Ichi the Killer. I cannot use any accurate words to describe why I cannot show you the title card of Ichi the Killer that would not get me demonetized off of YouTube. Nonetheless, it's alright. And again, part of that is just because the cast. Now Omori as Ichi is really kind of heartbreakingly good in this role because he knows he's a monster and regrets it. Okay, you should know this about me. I'm generally anti-director, but hugely, hugely pro-actor. And Tadanobu Asano, as the lead in this, is such... I wouldn't say fun to watch, but... because of the, yeah. Tadanobu Asano has played Raiden. He has played Genghis Khan. He has worked with Martin Scorsese, peace be unto his name. He was in a reboot of Zaitoichi, directed by Takeshi Kitano. He was goddamn Yabushige-sama in Shogun. Here he is in this thing, getting ganked by Cate Blanchett. I can just keep showing you clips that aren't Ichi the Killer. Hello, Blank Wall. Hi. Thank you for being blank wall. You're not hurting me. You're not hurting me like the screen is. Thank you, Blank Wall. Blank Wall. The movie's been banned in several countries because it's so really hard, violent, and just in a really nasty, cruel way, in a way that's about the nastiness and cruelty of it all. This is a hard movie to recommend. And that really is a limit on what movies get shown where, I mean, I can't watch this movie with my parents. I can watch Shogun with my parents. I cannot watch Ichi the Killer with my parents. If I watched Ichi the Killer with my parents, they would disown me, and they should. So censorship is sometimes a good thing, because I, in fact, do not want to necessarily stumble upon this movie and accidentally watch the first 10 minutes of Ichi the Killer without knowing what I'm getting into. Because I like having a working brain. I'd imagine I'd like it if my brain worked. It is hard to market movies. In general. The Empty Man is based on a comic written by a man named Cullen Bunn, who also wrote a series called The Damned, The Sixth Gun, and Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe. The Empty Man was always going to flop. The trailers don't do anything to make you want to watch the movie.
On the first night, you hear him. On the second night, you see him.
And on the third night?
Well, on the third night, he finds you.
Like, oh, he's an empty man. If you think about him, he'll come. Ooh, the Bye-Bye Man. The trailer makes the movie seem like the Bye-Bye Man. The Empty Man is not the Bye-Bye Man. The Empty Man is so much more subtle and interesting. Like the comic it's based on, it starts with this premise that people are committing these horrible acts of violence and then saying that the Empty Man, whatever that is, made them do it. And it's about these detectives trying to figure out exactly what the Empty Man is, and the answer keeps getting more abstract and abstract and abstract and abstract.
You know the child's game. If you say your name enough times, it becomes gibberish. That holds true for whole concepts, even entire bodies of thought. And that, my friend, is anything but harmless, if you really reflect on it. So the question becomes, if profound meaning can be robbed of something by so simple a task as repetition, which is more fundamental, which is more true? Your name or the gibberish? That is the empty man.
This movie was always going to flop because it came out in October 2020 after being pushed back from August 2020. And also, it was the last movie ever to premiere with the 20th Century Fox logo. The rights to the graphic novel had been picked up by 20th Century Fox before the buyout. The movie was in production and it just got released because they had to release it, because that's how the movie industry works. And no one could have predicted the pandemic. They also probably could predict that no one would care about this movie in particular, because there's a very, very small number of people that will be interested in a movie that takes place at Jacques Derrida High School. I am that person. This person is me. It's hard to market a movie with the iconography of the Bye-Bye Man and the storytelling of Mulholland Drive. Like there's this meaning that is constantly dangled before you, that is constantly deferred. Jacques Derrida called it différance.
Nothing exists. Even if something exists, nothing can be known about it. Even if something can be known about it, knowledge about it can't be communicated to others.
Some movies are far easier to market. Some movies with, say, better-known intellectual property, or more recognizable stars, or a more readily conveyable genre convention that you can lean on in marketing materials. For a movie like this, how the hell do you get people to watch it other than just people after the fact using word of mouth? Like I'm doing right now.
Yeah, no.
The language that we use to talk about movies is very, very narrow and also very, very, very market-driven. Talking about movies and focusing on things like box office returns and market share is the most boring-ass way to talk about movies ever. Because the economics behind movies are just there and gone. It's weather. It's just numbers that happen to other people's bank accounts. Talking about a movie in its cultural context, in its production context, as a part of history, as something that is made by people and not counted by bean counters, is something that we should do more often. Next on the list, this is actually a tie. So this one has to be a tie. Danger Diabolique and Barbarella. It's a tie because these two movies were worked on simultaneously by the same producer, Dino De Laurentiis. There were actors that were shoveled back and forth between the two production sets, and taken together, you get this portrait of a European film industry in the 60s that had its own burgeoning cast of comic book characters that they could draw in and were looking to monetize. Diabolique was directed by Mario Bava, who's best known for Blood and Black Lace, Black Sunday, these horror films, these great gothic horror films. And the direction that he brings to Diabolique is just so classy and, psychedelic. Like, so many of the 60s cliches are in this movie. And also, the chemistry between the two leads in Danger Diabolique are off the charts. The sexuality in it is as camp and as overblown as the sexuality in Barbarella. Not as overblown. I mean, Barbarella is not based on a comic. Barbarella is based on a hentai.
When we reach the crescendo, you will die. Pleasure.
And Jane Fonda, star of Grace and Frankie, Jane Fonda. Jane Fonda as Barbarella just kind of brings this very, Sigourney Weaver in Galaxy Quest kind of energy to it.
Look, I have one job on this lousy ship. It's stupid, but I'm gonna do it, okay?
She knows it's trash. She is there for the trash, and she just gives it her all, and she's so refreshingly earnest. The thing is, for a certain generation of American viewers, these movies are known as hyper camp and silly. Barbarella is still silly. Barbarella is still profoundly silly. You know, sometimes just want to see a chariot drawn by a manta ray with lipstick. Danger Diabolique could potentially be taken more seriously, but still, it didn't perform well in the US. Danger Diabolique in particular ended up on the Grindhouse circuit, in the drive-in movie circuit, where it would be in the same roster of movies that would later show up with a silhouette of puppets in front of them, with a bunch of Midwesterners yammering over it. And even then, it's in an American context, and you cannot extract it from what it could be outside of that American context.
This guy.
The thing about marketing is that, as bad as it is, it's also necessary. The word marketing is a value-neutral term. Marketing just means all the mechanisms that it takes to get the movie in front of your eyeballs. And for this movie, a lot of people, a whole generation of people, only know it as a camp classic and have not seen it with its full color and full ethos, without, you know, the silhouettes and the Midwestern yammering. I mean, it's perfectly fine that Gen X probably only knows this movie from that one Beastie Boys video. Body move in! Everybody move in! Body move in! We be body move in! But it's still easier to find that video with those clips than it is to find the actual movie that it's from. And that's the thing. The market's hand is not invisible. It's very visible. Colonel Blimp was a comic strip character from the Evening Post drawn by David Lowe. He was a very British archetype, very old military man with a giant walrus mustache, hanging around a Turkish bath, as they called saunas, talking about various bad military advice.
You damned young idiot. War starts at midnight, haven't you been told?
Oh, yes, sir. That's why we're here.
May I ask on what authority?
On the authority of these guns and these men, sir.
Authority? Authority? How dare you, sir?
The whole joke is that he's, like, outdated. He's this guy trained in old ways of war that has no idea how new ways of war work. He has this old assumption that war is this, like, gentlemanly thing that people get up to. And so, during World War II, you know, kind of an old dinosaur.
But war starts at midnight.
Oh, yes, you say war starts at midnight. How do you know the enemy says so, too?
But, my dear fellow, that was agreed, wasn't it?
Agreed, my foot. How many agreements have been kept by the enemy since this war started? We agree to keep to the rules of the game, and they go on kicking us in the pants.
Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger took this very brief sketch of a character and imagined his whole life. Imagined how he got to be who he was. That is to say, it's Colonel Blimp's origin story.
Miss Hunter, I'm going to grow a moustache. What is your opinion?
The main character of the movie is not Colonel Blimp. The main character is a man named Clive Candy, who lives the life that this comic strip character has. You can see why he is the way he is. You can see the people that he is trying to emulate. You can see the culture that he was raised in. And so in a way, he is naive, despite being a veteran.
Well, I was a soldier. And before that, I suppose you were at college, and I was a soldier. And I was a soldier when you were a baby. And before you were born, sir, when you were nothing but a toss-up between a girl's and a boy's name, I was a soldier then.
Roger Lively as Clive Candy and Anton Walbrook as Theo Kretschmar Schuldorf. An Englishman and a German, two soldiers raised on opposite sides of a war. They met before World War I, but were very much raised in this culture of military ceremony that is usually extended to only people within the imperial complex, you know, within the imperial system. Deborah Kerr is wonderful as the various women that the plot puts in the way to distract the two leading men, and the audience away from the obvious fact the two of them are madly in love. I mean, the female love interest that only exists to prove the straightness of the two male leads exists in a bunch of movies. Jean Moreau played that character in Jules et Jim. Maribel Verdú played it in Y tu mamá también. Zendaya's played that role. So's Gal Gadot. It is still a profoundly empathetic look at this guy who has just stayed on through a whole life, who's lived a full life, lost everyone that he ever knew, and hangs on to what he still has, which is stuff that isn't very useful anymore. And there's something real about that. There's something very human and fragile about telling that kind of story.
If you let yourself be defeated by them just because you are too fair to hit back the same way they hit at you, there won't be any methods but Nazi methods.
And yes, I did pick this movie solely to have a film on here that directly influenced Martin Scorsese.
I was always fascinated by the choices and the storytelling of Powell Pressburger. For example, the big dramatic moments, the duel and the death of his wife, the winning wars, losing wars, all the major events, they just left them out.
The plot-central duel in which Clive Candy gets the scar which inspires him to grow his mustache is not shown, which inspired Scorsese to not include the major fight that won Jake LaMotta all of his titles in Raging Bull.
The shot is directly inspired by the long lead up to the duel in The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, where, as I said, the duel itself is not shown.
By the way, if you are a comic book movie fan and you are still mad at Martin Scorsese, get over it. He was saying that comic book movies were theme parks and roller coasters. Theme parks are fun. Roller coasters are fun. Alejandro González Iñárritu called comic book movies cultural genocide.
The director, Alejandro González Iñárritu, said during the time of the promo of that film that superhero films are cultural genocide. I wonder what you thought of that.
Look, I respect the heck out of him. And I think for a man whose native tongue is Spanish, to be able to put together a phrase like cultural genocide just speaks to how bright he is.
Cultural genocide in Spanish is genocidio cultural. Is este Touré? But really, Martin Scorsese said the most lightly critical things about comic book movies, and people made him a meme. He obviously knows that he's a meme.
We're movie lovers. Of course we're going to tell you what cinema really is.
And I hope he never stops appearing in his best work, which is as a supporting character in his daughter Francesca's TikToks.
We're movie lovers. Of course we have film posters all over our house.
Now do that again. Do it again. It has to have more, you're proud of these posters. You're happy to have these posters.
Francesca, you are doing the cinema world a great service, and please never stop. Thank you. Watching Martin Scorsese direct a dog it's so pure. Thank you. You have made my life better, Francesca Scorsese. Now let's talk about comics. Like real comics. So in French they're bande dessinée, in Japanese manga. Now the reason comics are called comics in English is because they primarily existed as supplemental material, as funny little sides in serious newspapers. And comics were not just things that were drawn in newspapers, but also performed on stage. Like, cartooning was a live act done in vaudeville. Literally, stand-up comics. And also, these cartoons were done in an American context, and I don't know if you know this, but America is a country founded on white supremacy, and it is impossible to talk about American history without talking about the history of white supremacy within it. Shouting this over the train. And of course, all of these cartoons leaned heavily on racist stereotypes. So when Winsor McCay gets up in front of an audience and draws this guy, it is deeply uncomfortable to watch now. It is also the birth of animation as a medium, arguably. Winsor McCay has a pretty good claim to being the first person to animate, creating or arguably perfecting most of the techniques that animators use today. Correction here, very arguably. I was way off in saying that. Animation has a few centuries of prehistory before the invention of celluloid film, and there were many, many people who made filmed animations before McCay, from France to Japan to America. But this video isn't a history of animation. McCay didn't invent animation, but he was definitely a technical pioneer in the field. Lesson is, always be careful when saying anyone was the first to do anything. I can't even say that Winsor McCay was the first to adapt a comic into a film. He wasn't even the first to adapt a Winsor McCay comic. Still, it gives me a reason to talk about the origins of comics themselves, and Winsor McCay's comics in particular. And he does it in a very brief but still very ambitious, very detailed animation based on his own comic strip characters, Little Nemo. The racist caricatures next to him are Impy and Flip. Flip was played by Jason Momoa a couple years ago in a very poorly guided attempt to make the Winsor McCay Little Nemo and Slumberland property viable again. Little Nemo was a pre-established comic book character, and a very, very popular one. I accidentally said comic book character here, and I was wrong. Comic books weren't sold separately from newspapers until 1934, when Eastern Color Printing published famous funnies. Little Nemo was a comic in a newspaper. He first appeared in print in 1905 in a strip, Dream of the Rarebit Fiend, which is about a little boy who has a dream caused by a bad mince pie. That strip proved popular enough to give Little Nemo his own spin-off, where he is the star, and his Slumberland creates these fantastical images that splash across the page, and it's really still beautiful to look at. And this is the place where comics were born, as brightly colored advertisements get people to pick up the page and delve into them. Winsor McCay was working on and off for various newspaper publishers, including William Randolph Hearst. Speaking of William Randolph Hearst and his arch-nemesis Joseph Pulitzer, Hearst and Pulitzer themselves are major players in the history of American comics because of the work that they enabled by Richard F. Outcolt. This guy created a character called the Yellow Kid. The Yellow Kid may or may not have been based on one of the many, many immigrant children that lived in New York at the time, and so may also very well be a racist caricature. I've seen conflicting reports on how racist he is. Nonetheless, he was a popular character. He was a popular comic character in these papers, so much so that the fights between Pulitzer and Hearst over who hired the cartoonist who created the Yellow Kid was a major player in their circulation wars. The Yellow Kid gave his name to the trashy tabloid exploitative journalism that Pulitzer and Hearst were pioneering. Yellow journalism. And again, this is market logic. And in a market, you need to be as loud as possible to get people to buy your wares, to see the work that you do. It has always been a game of grabbing attention. And from the Yellow Kid on, even through Little Nemo, as visually innovative as that was, there's always been this game. There's always been the game of publishing, of getting as many images out there as possible, as getting as recognizable a symbol as you can into the minds of your audience. Thus, simple, recognizable characters with simple, memorable catchphrases. What me worry? Keep on truckin'. I hate Mondays. Feels good, man.
I've just always been into drawing. And it takes tons of time to come up with a character that you like enough to draw over and over again.
Wait, are memes comics? Always have been. Matt Fury, genuinely talented cartoonist Matt Fury, does not deserve what happened to him.
Pepe the Frog has been added to the Anti-Defamation League's database of hate symbols. In a press release, the organization wrote the character had been, quote, used by haters on social media to suggest racist, anti-Semitic, or other bigoted notions as a hate symbol.
Feels Good Man is a hell of a documentary about how a guy's creation got away from him and became something that he never intended. The actual character of Pepe the Frog is so slight, I mean, kind of all the characters of Boys Club are, because there's an innocence to Boys Club. There's an innocence to the comics that he draws. It's just four college-age dudes hanging out. The whole reason Pepe says feels good, man, is because it's nice to use the bathroom without pants. That is the panel that got cut and remixed and memed into everything that came after, which this movie does a great job of showing how Pepe himself because he is so slight a character, because he is this kind of empty vessel upon which anyone can project things, just became co-opted by the worst people online.
Owning a rare Pepe is about being alpha. It's about having dank, rare Pepes nobody else has, and it's about how do we get to the moon in a Lambo.
They not only talk to Matt Fury, they talk to his partner, they talk to his fans, including Lisa Hannawalt, whose own cartoon Tuca and Birdie is fantastic if you haven't seen it. They talk to the author of The Meme Machine. They talk to an actual wizard to describe the idea of meme magic.
A meme can become the anchor, the seed, if you will, around which a group of like-minded people can gather and toward which they can focus their energy. That's a basic tool of meme magic.
And they talk to the founder of Look Ahead America.
I think that President Trump is a real-life version of Pepe in the ability to elicit a reaction and to get attention and to express and to capture people's hopes and fears.
It's really hard to know why it was Pepe in particular that became the mascot for the alt-right. Truth is, all cartoons have the potential to be used by reactionary groups because of the nature of cartooning itself. Follow me on this. The author of Understanding Comics, Scott McCloud, has this fantastic diagram where he creates this triangle of a pure abstraction of a person to a photograph of a person to the shapes that would make up a person, and shows cartooning on a three-way sliding scale of those three ideals. All of cartooning exists on that frame, and within that you can display so many variants, so many nuances, so many universalities within people, and also show specificities that can be used to exclude people. Caricature has a long-standing tradition in comics, and it has a very problematic history. No less a comics creator than Will Eisner wrote a whole chapter in his book about comics as visual narrative. Comic book art deals with recognizable reproductions of human conduct. Its drawings are a mirror reflection and depend on the reader's storied memory of experience to visualize an idea or process quickly. This makes necessary the simplification of images into repeatable symbols. Ergo, stereotypes. Okay, so that's why you drew that one character in the spirit that way, I'm sure, Will. The thing about caricature is it is shorthand. It is inherently reductive. It can take a real person and abstract them to their broadest qualities, and also show specificities that can be used to exclude people. That can lead to a trend of reductionism, of stereotype, and of, a lot of really ugly politics that flow forth from that. And even within Will Eisner's book, he includes images of standards of reference for beauty, heroism, and evil. He makes a panel of a man barging into a room with an evil villain standing over a woman. The man says, "Stand back, I have come to save her." The panel's labeled romance. He then makes the same panel, replaces the lead character with a goofy boy. "Stand back, I have come to save her." It is labeled humor. It's just that one meme. Did Will Eisner create the Chad Virgin meme? No. Will Eisner did not create the Chad Virgin meme. Highlights Comics created the Chad Virgin meme when they created Goofus and Gallant. Again, memes are comics. Memes are visual language used to convey very broad ideas, and thus a haven for reactionary politics, which depends on broad ideas and reducing people to the abstracts that they need to be reduced to. Oh, by the way, Feels Good Man also includes the greatest one-on-one fight scene in the history of comedy movies.
Is this our version of the neo-Nazi movement?
It's Pepe's become kind of a symbol.
Bum, 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 ba-dum, bum, bum. Okay, we've already entered the top 10, and we need to talk about some of the absolutely iconic comics characters that have yet to make it onto this list. In the late 1970s, the public was cynical and jaded, and the general thinking at the time was that people weren't ready to accept the earnestness of some of the most classic comic book characters ever created. And so, the fact that this movie exists is a miracle. It really is that good. It took a whole team of screen legends to bring the story to cinematic life. An auteur director proven in multiple genres, one of the greatest leading actresses of her generation, and in the starring role, in the title character role, a yet unproven, Juilliard-trained actor who would go on to enter our hearts and minds, and we would believe that a man can punch an octopus 100 feet vertically out of the water after eating spinach. The accumulated filth of all their posts and content will foam up about their waists, and all the stands and consumers will look up and shout, "Validate us!" And I will look down and whisper, "No." But seriously, Robert Altman's Popeye? It really fits well within Robert Altman's greater filmography, especially like McCabe and Mrs. Miller, where you just like sit down in this whole atmosphere that he's built, this rustic atmosphere. Like that's where the movie has its best strengths, is in those classic Altman group scenes. Overlapping dialogue and jockeying to like control the conversation, that's where it shines. And it shines less when it's trying to be the cartoon that it so obviously has to be, because it's Popeye. So, Bluto, he's angry. He sees his girl Olive Oil. She's with Popeye. He starts seeing red, as the old cliche goes. Now, you could easily do this by tinting the film red, or just showing the red strip in their Technicolor thing. But, no. Robert Altman is a professional. If your character's gonna see red, what do? You dress your characters and paint your set red. Filmmaking. All that said, Robert Altman's Popeye is the blueprint. Hear me out. So, Robert Altman's Popeye accurately maps out the hero's origins within a larger universe. Popeye was not the main character of Thimble Theater when E.C. Seeger created him. E.C. Seeger's Thimble Theater already had a fully rounded out cast of characters that Popeye went into. That's reflected in the story of the film. He is an outsider, a sailor, obviously, coming into the small town of Sweet Haven and meeting the family of the Oils. Olive Oil was better known not as Popeye's love interest, but as part of the larger family of oil-based puns. There is the start of a cinematic universe here. It is true to the comic origins. There's a Hollywood hack-friendly story arc where the main character has to reconcile with a lost parental figure.
Father, it's me, your old fake son.
The first act ends with an action beat where the hero shows off some of their powers against some low-level goons. By the way, goon is an E.C. Seeger creation. Goons were the characters that Popeye beats up when he goes on his various adventures. Goon, according to the Online Etymology Dictionary, comes from E.C. Seeger's comic strip. Every instance of the modern connotation of goon, okay, not every instance, stems from E.C. Seeger, from the Popeye comics. The word goon first appeared in U.S. humorist Frederick Allen's piece, The Goon and His Style, which defined it as a person with a heavy touch, one who lacks a playful mind, perhaps a made-up word, or from goni, meaning simpleton, which was applied by sailors to the albatross and similar big, clumsy birds. It comes from sailing, okay. The Goons were characters in the Thimble Theater comic strip starring Popeye. Yeah, what is going on here? Look at these masticators. Oh, they're gooning on me. Now, where was I? Oh yeah, there's a mandatory joke about how ridiculous the comic's writing sounds when spoken out loud.
You know, it's one thing I got, it's a sense of humor.
Where did you get that pronunciation?
There's a tease of the final act turn where the hero embraces their full power.
Like spinach! I want spinach, I'll ask you for spinach.
Every time any character does something even lightly related to the comics, there's a big song and dance number.
Hey, ma'am, can I blow it down?
I would gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today.
He would gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today.
I am what I am, what I am, and I am what I am, and that's all that I am.
Most of the movie is a lot of detailed character work building up the relationships between the cast at large, leading up to a major comics-accurate finale, showing off the characters as we've always wanted to see them. The finale of the film is Popeye finally eating his spinach, crossing the threshold, and Robert Altman's Popeye is an MCU film. Next on the list, number 8. We need to talk about the Garfield movie.
We're gonna need the big scale!
Does she need to announce it to the whole office?
I prefer the real Garfield movie.
Oh, it's always gotta be smashing and crashing. Nobody poisons anymore.
I said the real Garfield movie.
Garfield, guess what today is?
Listen carefully, John. I don't do pop quizzes before breakfast, okay?
I said the real Garfield movie.
Who's there?
Jaden Gitchell.
Jaden Gitchell who?
It's Jaden Gitchell, and I've had 3 sexual partners.
Perfection. Lasagna Cat is a web series that advertised itself as a series of tributes to Jim Davis, the author of the Garfield comic strip. Garfield has been everywhere in my life always. Garfield is ubiquitous. Garfield, in 2002, was awarded with the Guinness World Record for most widely published comic strip. Fatal Farm made a series of shorts in 2008 which asked, is Garfield actually funny? They have a very highly faithful comic adaptation at the beginning of each video.
Garfield, all you do is sleep. Sleep and sleep and sleep and sleep. Know what I call someone like that?
Frisky?
It is a very faithful comic adaptation. And that is the comic. That is undoubtedly what Garfield is. This is the strip that we know as Garfield. It takes the joke. It molds the joke. It re-edits the joke.
Know what I call someone like that?
Frisky?
There's an old saying, breaking apart a joke is like an autopsy. You understand the joke better, but the joke cannot survive the process. And what they do with Jim Davis's work, it is the most hateful thing I've ever seen. I'm laughing because, wow, I have never, ever experienced the hatred that they have for this one man. This might be a targeted harassment campaign.
You knocked my fern off the windowsill.
Lasagna Cat came back in 2017.
Now where could my pipe be?
Garfield?
They got ambitious.
I saw for the first time in my life, I saw a vision of clarity. I saw a comic strip.
Leading up to a 7-hour video, the sex survey.
What do I do?
State your name and the number of sexual partners you've had.
John Arbuckle, 2.
I mean, one, it's a revealing survey.
Never had sex in my entire life. I just wanted Garfield to know that. I wanted him to know that I'm very lonely.
Mostly revealing how many people say they have either 0 or 69 partners, but also all the people who decide to have fun with the gag.
My name's Evan, and it's lasagna counts as a sexual partner, then I've had one sexual partner.
All the people who take it too seriously.
If I could just say one thing to you, it's, I don't like you very much. Why do you hate Mondays? Garfield, you're a cat. It's not like you have a job.
A couple people who take it way too seriously and reveal things that they really should be telling a therapist and not Garfield. The video ends. If you have seen the video, you know how it ends. I will not spoil how it ends. I will, however, read the translation that a Polish Redditor gave of the final monologue. This child isn't mine. This child is from the darkness. I bore the humanity's curse. I can ask for mercy, which I won't get. My soul will be consumed and thrown up and then consumed again. Forever. Sick joke, but no one's laughing. My blood will stay. Death isn't the end. I am in hell. This is hell. This series is about Garfield. I have never... so much hatred directed at this profoundly mediocre work of art. This profoundly mediocre yet ubiquitous work of art that this piece, that this series of videos forces us to grapple with. Do not come at me in the comments over whether or not this web series is cinema or not. Either Lasagna Cat is cinema or nothing is!
Garfield and I are very dissimilar in many ways. I look forward to Monday mornings, and I'm an optimist, whereas Garfield is a pessimist.
Park Chan-wook's Old Boy is baby's first messed up Korean drama. Or it used to be, now it's Parasite, but Old Boy was that before that. And yes, the co-writer of Dolphin Man Battles the Sex Lobsters is also a fan.
If there's one scene that sticks out, it's obviously the hallway fight. That was a huge inspiration to me, and you can see our own version of a hallway fight in Guardians 3.
And yes, it is not based on a comic, but on a manga. And of course, there's a massive manga industry in Japan, which itself works in tandem with the American comics industry. Old Boy was published in America by Dark Horse Comics, who also own the rights to characters like Hellboy. Not that you'll ever see Odaisu and Hellboy team up. Now, again, the term comic is Anglo-centric, and it comes from a very specific tradition that sprung out of American newspapers, where these strips were done as comedy. They were comic strips. That term has a ghettoizing effect. It takes an entire medium and puts it in a non-serious category. Now, this spot could have gone to any number of manga adaptations, and there are many, and there are great ones. Akira, Ghost in the Shell. But I'm putting Old Boy on this list because it exists in a fascinating area for me. A work in translation. This movie was adapted first not in Japan, but in Korea. There was a non-licensed adaptation in Hindi a couple years after this, Zinda, directed by Sanjay Gupta. No, not that Sanjay Gupta, a different Sanjay Gupta. And of course, it was infamously remade in America by Spike Lee. Now, no disrespect to Spike Lee, the story actually does gain a lot of interesting nuance when placed in an American setting. I think it's fascinating that in the Korean version, after being imprisoned for years and years and years, he's released in a trunk on the top of a building. In the American version, he's released in the middle of a field. See, the thing about movies, a lot of people will cry rip-off or that sort of thing. Only value, quote, original ideas, unquote. Even though Old Boy itself is not an original idea, the original idea was in a manga. But you know, I come from theater. I'm used to thinking of plays being redone in different settings. I have a whole series about all the many, many things that people can do with Shakespeare plays, and have done with Shakespeare plays. All stories can be told and retold like that, and they gain new nuances when placed in different cultural settings, from Korea to India to America. I do think the American version is weaker than the Korean version, if only because I know where the story's going, and it doesn't really gain much by having this scene acted out by Josh Brolin and Elizabeth Olsen. You took everything from me! I don't even know who you are. Oh! I hurt myself. God, I love this movie. I love this movie so much. I've never had a bad screening of it. There's so many more layers that you get from multiple viewings of this. It's such a beautifully told story.
Still cold.
And yes, it is based on a bande dessinée. I took Spanish in high school. Now, bande dessinée, literally drawn strips, BD, Franco-Belgian comics, have a long tradition, and a lot of very popular characters. Tintin and Asterix are two of the biggest ones, and also a lot of very interesting sci-fi stuff, including this story, which was written in the 80s. And it gained so much by having an international cast. It means so much that all of the rhetoric, all the things that are actually said by the characters in the movie in English are meaningless rhetoric, but the actual core of it, the actual politics, is just shown in the props, in the staging, in the material reality that everyone lives in. It's a beautiful metaphor. It works so well on screen, and it is still so shockingly radical in its politics. And Chris Evans is never better when he's really revealing some awful, ugly sides to himself.
You know what I hate about myself? I know what people taste like. I know that babies taste best.
I'm gonna tell my kids this was Captain America Winter Soldier. He is a soldier, it's winter! But the thing about Franco-Belgian comics is also the same thing as manga. They are linguistically separated. It takes extra labor to translate these graphic novels into another language. And so, linguistically, in a global market, people will not have access to certain pieces of work because of the language they speak.
This is so disappointing. C'est trop décevant.
Es una muy grande desilusión.
No, we don't need all that.
Comics, manga, BD, they're all interlinked, of course. All the same medium, all competing and mutually dependent industries. American comics had a major impact on the aesthetics of Japanese manga, and Franco-Belgian BD, and Italian fumetto, Chinese manhwa, Korean manhwa, every form of what Will Eisner suggested as sequential art. Because American comics, like American movies, are sold worldwide. The tendency of everyone, including me in this very video, to use comics and superheroes interchangeably could possibly be attributed to America's global cultural dominance, but that's an oversimplification. It is not an American industry pushing out all the non-American brands. It's not that simple. It is an American culture within the industry that has also been systematically pushing out other strains of storytelling. Like this.
Give me all your money, bitch! Where did you get that?
This
You'll never believe it.
is a comic book movie. This is
Where?
a great comic book movie. It's a brilliant comic book movie.
Can I get you?
No, I do not want a biscotti with that.
God. How can you stand all these assholes? Some people are okay, but mostly I just feel like poisoning everybody.
Enid and Rebecca are two average comics fans. They absolutely do have the attitude of the average comics fan.
Wow, this is so bad, it's almost good. This is so bad, it's gone past good and back to bad again.
Enid is a talented cartoonist, and she spends her time drawing caricatures of the people in her town.
Check out these people behind you. I'm totally convinced they're Satanists.
Enid in Ghost World looks at all the people in her town and makes caricatures out of them, makes them into broad stereotypes, based on nothing but the first thing she sees.
Oh my God, he just ordered a giant glass of milk.
That's a vanilla milkshake.
Steve Buscemi Seymour is a comic book hero. Like, in the classic sense. I mean, the comics were originally funnies. They were supposed to be about people being fallible, being weak. They were about sad sacks and Casper milk toasts and kids who needed their security blankets. I mean, there's an inherent vulnerability in the way certain characters can be drawn, and there can be a lot of empathy in seeing this, like, universalized symbol of a person dealing with all of the same silly things that we deal with. And that's still a powerful thing. We all feel like that dog saying this is fine. And we all feel like Seymour getting stood up at a date. Terry Zwigoff's Ghost World is about a kid learning empathy for the people that she draws.
We're such a stupid idiot. Did you even look through the rest of the book? See? You're like my hero.
Heroes and comics. They're inseparable. But how did they become inseparable? Why did superheroes seem to take over an entire medium? Scott McCloud argues that diversity of genre is interlinked with the struggle for diversity of representation. It also confronts many of these same obstacles. Like most words, genre sports an evolving definition. I'm using it here to mean a broad category of fiction or nonfiction in any communications medium which presupposes certain elements of style or content. Among the popular genres featured on today's comic store shelves are 1. Superhero comics, 2. No need to dwell on sales.
Dan, Klaus! I really identified with the girls in Ghost World. They made me feel like I wasn't so alone.
Yeah, whatever. Do you know anyone who works at Batman? 'Cause I really want to draw Batman.
So much of the American comics industry has been writers and artists working within the two big brands, DC and Marvel, and trying to find spaces within that industry, within that market, to be seen.
I'm awesome at utility belts. Check these out. This is where the Batman keeps his money, in case he has to take the bus.
So Ghost World exists in tandem with the Bronze Age of comics. While all the violence and hyper-edginess was going on in the 90s, people like Dan Klaus and many, many others were taking comics back to its roots as depictions of everyday life. Scott McCloud is also a gifted cartoonist, and he has a great visual example of how the superhero story has taken over comics in his book, Reinventing Comics. This is the comics market's most enduring chicken or egg dilemma. How to make comic stores appealing to new kinds of readers if those readers never step inside. It's easy to see how comics got into this mess. Like everything in retail, it begins with the dynamics of limited resources. In this case, the limited resource known as shelf space. If you're a retailer with 26 slots on your wall, you can sell every type of comic from A to Z, as in fact the comics markets once did. But if you're paying an arm and a leg for every inch of that store, and you find that A through C sells 5 times as many copies, it's only a matter of time before you'll want to, or have to, make some changes. Your reader base may go down as a result, but your profit per inch will go up. And day to day, that may be all you can afford to think about. Once the process is complete, and the B to Z reading masses are long gone, diversifying again will be difficult. You can try putting a few B books back on the shelf, but only A buyers will see them. Thus, any effort to build a market for B comics usually begins, both creatively and commercially, by making them at least palatable to the A crowd. Then waiting for the B buyers to trickle back in. Only when the B work takes its proper shape, however, can any real progress in genre diversity be made. And hopefully not revert down the road if some new generation marketing decides that maybe the company's B comics might sell better if they looked more like A's. Again, it's the ghettoizing effect. It's training people to look for the obvious symbols of and just teaching them to disregard anything else that might possibly fall into that category, but not really. Defending a genre requires pushing out reality. And it leads to things like, say, Chris Stuckman putting M. Night Shyamalan's Unbreakable on his list of greatest comic book movies of all time, when it's not even based on a comic.
This is a film that is not based off of any comic book that's out there. This is a film that is all about comic books, though.
Like my shirt?
Qu'est-ce que c'est? Michael Jackson?
Ce symbole de la décadence occidentale.
Mais pas du tout, madame. C'est Malcolm X. Tu te fous de moi?
One of the great things that the graphic novel can do well is autobiography, especially for people who have been through really tough situations, who may not have any other safe way to revisit those memories. So cartooning can cover a lot of really hard, triggering ground, while still being truthful to oneself. The one place where cartooning becomes empathetic is in universalizing your own experience. And Marjane Satrapi, her life is very unique. Everyone's life is very unique, but Marjane Satrapi's in particular, her childhood was in Iran during the revolution, when the Shah was overthrown and the Ayatollahs established power. And so from within Iran, she can see all the freedoms that her family starts losing, all of the public behaviors that are now enforced upon her. And after a major violent event, her family decides that it's too dangerous for her to stay in Iran, and so they send her to Austria, Vienna. And there she sees Iran from the outside, by all the racism that Europeans throw at her just for being Iranian, and all the ignorance that they put her through, and all the whiny posing they do about the inherent hollowness of Western politics. I mean, Western politics is hollow, but they're refusing to acknowledge the real bloody consequences that it has on real people.
De toute façon, tout ça c'est du vent. La vie est néant. Quand un homme prend conscience de ce vide, il peut plus vivre, alors il invente des jeux de dirigeants et de dirigeants.
N'importe quoi, toi, hein. L'existence est pas absurde. Tu sais qu'il y a des gens qui donnent leur vie pour la liberté? Tu crois que mon oncle est mort juste pour s'amuser? Connard.
And Marjane Satrapi, in walking these two worlds, manages to tell her life story in such a way that it gives both her Iranian family and us as outsiders a perspective that we otherwise wouldn't get. Something that personal, something that autobiographical could not exist in most Hollywood contexts, because who the hell wants to devote all of their time and effort to telling someone else's story? But you can get that level of personal detail and honesty and grappling with one's own place in a greater system of oppression from a work like this. There's a quote attributed to Marjane Satrapi. I can't find a source for it, unfortunately, but this is from Goodreads. If I have one message to give to the secular American people, it's that the world is not divided into countries. The world is not divided between East and West. You are American, I'm Iranian, we don't know each other, but we talk together and we understand each other perfectly. The difference between you and your government is much bigger than the difference between you and me. And the difference between me and my government is much bigger than the difference between me and you. And our governments are very much the same.
Quand vous courez, votre derrière, il fait des mouvements. Comment dire, impudiques?
Eh ben, vous avez qu'à pas regarder mon cul!
The great thing about international stories is that they exist beyond national narratives. And nationalism is a narrative. American nationalism, Iranian nationalism, it's a narrative. And one that can easily be broken by looking at a different perspective. By looking at the perspective of someone who has lived within both of those narratives. This is an internationally celebrated book about internationalism. And that global perspective, that extra-nationalist perspective, outside of nationalism, is more necessary than ever. Especially when so many people are trying to force us within a very confined, very controlled nationalist narrative. Narratives which are enforced in everyday conversation and in major business decisions.
What are you? I'm a Mona! So you're a girl and a rhino? And a lot of things.
Hopefully this comes out easier than the other book, which was buried. Nimona started as a webcomic by an author named N.D. Stevenson. His work is about a shapeshifter, Nimona, their best friend, a villain, and the knight-errant culture in which they exist and are persecuted.
Can you just be you? please?
I don't follow.
Girl, you.
But I'm not a girl. I'm a shark.
The movie's rights were purchased by Blue Sky Studios, which are best known for their Ice Age movies. Blue Sky Studios had the rights, the movie was in production, the casting was set, with Chloe Grace Moretz and Riz Ahmed in the lead.
Can you please just be normal for a second?
Normal?
I just think it'd be easier if you were a girl.
Easier to be a girl? You're hilarious.
I mean, easier if you looked human.
Easier for who?
For you. A lot of people aren't as accepting as me.
Mm-hmm.
The movie was in production, shots were being worked on when Blue Sky Studios was closed by Disney after their purchase of 20th Century Fox.
Monster.
And the movie was shelved. Until it was picked up by Annapurna and Netflix and released to wide acclaim. It was free on YouTube for a while, as Netflix was gearing up for an Oscar campaign.
Did you see the way that little girl looked at me? Kids. Little kids. They grow up believing that they can be a hero if they drive a sword into the heart of anything different. And I'm the monster?
And the actual movie is one of the most heartbreaking pieces of animation I've ever seen in my life. It's a fun adventure for all of it. There's some great world building. The cast is fantastic. The two lead characters being gay, awesome. And they start, oh wait, this movie was suppressed, wasn't it? Is this why? And then I kept watching the movie, and there's that backstory of Nimona's character, and you have these voices of people just... these constant voices, even from characters that we like, characters that the movie asks us to empathize with, saying that she's a monster. It would be so much easier if she just stayed the way we expect to see her. All culminating in this, I can only say, Kubrickian cut of 1,000 years between the greatest betrayal in Nimona's life to the civilization built upon that betrayal. And to think that this movie was almost shelved forever. To think that people actually decided that this wasn't a story worth telling now. When so many people are actively, violently being pushed out of the public view, to know that this story almost wasn't told is heartbreaking.
That monster is a threat to our very way of life!
And what if we're wrong? What if we've always been wrong?
It makes you wonder what people are actually fighting for when they're fighting for good comic book movies, and what their actual priorities are. Which is an excellent segue into number 2 on this list. A movie that, by all accounts, should not exist, that should not be shown in theaters, that does not have any legal right to exist, and yet it does. The movie that takes up the number 2 spot on this list is a joyous celebration of itself, of the fact that it can exist in the way that it does. Of course, I'm talking about The People's Joker.
When I look back on my life, before going jokeman to harlequin, so to speak, I wasn't even sure I existed. It's like blurry, cracked mosaic of all these gender revelations.
Vera Drew has no connections to DC Comics, has no connection to Warner Brothers, who owns DC Comics, but has had a long and storied career in post-production, in particular as an editor for things like The Tim and Eric Show. And so Vera Drew's work has been visually, certainly, the visual comedy that she's pioneered has been part of the culture for a long time. And so, because of those connections that she has, the Hollywood connections, it does give the movie a bit of an air of legitimacy about it, but so much of what makes the movie so delicious is how illegitimate it is. It's beautiful that these characters, which are very old, these characters created for children, that are now in their 80s. Children that are now in the halls of power. They have been constantly retooled and reworked by the people who own the rights to these properties to get them to be resold, but always to an imagined middle market, an imagined meme that they can market to. And considering this movie exists when the way Warner Brothers treated the Batgirl movie, which included a trans main character, this movie rules. Because the Joker is a versatile character, and the character played by Vera Drew in this movie, Joker the Harlequin, is as nuanced and thoughtful a story as the story of, say, Arthur Fleck, or, Jack Napier, or even Melvin. Cite not the deep lore to me, I was there when it was written. There was this beautiful DIY aspect to all of it. Watching it in theaters, the thing I was most reminded of was Shrek Retold, which retells Shrek like minute for minute, beat for beat by a bunch of online dweebs with too much time in their hands. A bunch of video carnies, you know? Just taking this movie that they all knew backwards and forwards and retelling it in their own goofy, genuine style. And a lot of it can be very... There is a word that I will often see around this movie, and that word is cringe. Let me assure you... Let me not assure you. Let me tell you now, directly, The People's Joker is not cringe. The People's Joker has defeated cringe. The People's Joker has taken all of the cringe, taken it and put it into one place, and made you realize, oh no, it was never cringe, it was just queer art. It was just outsider art. It was just stuff made by people who were talented and didn't have an audience. And they do now. We all know the cringe compilations were just like ways to make fun of queer people, right? That's all they are. They always were that. So Vera Drew, legitimately a groundbreaking auteur director, Vera Drew, my heart goes out to you. You have made a great film. Thank you for defeating the cringe.
Bruh, this movie looks like a Nostalgia Critic video. Why is everyone freaking out over it? I've never seen anything from Nostalgia Critic. I've never watched Channel Awesome, and it keeps coming up in reviews quite often, both in a positive way and in a negative way. In both hurt.
Vera Drew, you did not make a Channel Awesome film. And I mean that sincerely as a compliment. You give too much of a shit to make a Channel Awesome film. I was in a Channel Awesome film. You did not make a Channel Awesome film. I mean, you certainly did way more interesting stuff with characters owned by DC Comics than they did. So, this clip here, this is an accurate representation of what it was like to work at Channel Awesome. But it's not about the Joker or Harley Quinn. It's about Vera Drew. It is about a real person. It is about someone's real experiences that is told in a genuinely heartfelt way. I kind of teared up at the end with the emotional climax of the film. The emotional climax of the film, I should add, involves the Steve Miller Band. You know why. It is a story of hope that we need right now. And a story of someone who realizes that it's really not cool to die a hero. And it may actually be wonderful to live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
So you have people that are sitting at home in their pajamas literally making better stuff. More people would rather watch a damn YouTube video or a live stream than watch a highly produced Hollywood movie right now. That is a testament to how bad things are in Hollywood.
Deceptive bit of editing here. These guys are not talking about the People's Joker. These guys are talking about someone who made an edit of the poster for the upcoming movie Superman Legacy, directed by James Gunn. James Gunn, aka the director of James Gunn's PG porn. Comedy rule of 3. This is the original poster. This is the edit they made. The edit is, frankly, bland. Brighter colors, a background overexposed and devoid of detail, and a smile slapped on Superman's face. The original? Honestly, I love it. It's funny. The juxtaposition of the urgency of the skybeam and the casual drudgery of Superman putting on his boots one at a time is funny. It humanizes Superman. It's a joke. A comic moment. This is not a big display of strength and power. We've all been there. Dare I say, it looks like a job for Superman.
So the original image you've probably seen at this point. I think everything about it is just low energy and...
It is jarring. Just look how, when he switches over to it, look how jarring the original image is versus this Photoshop.
Of course they prefer the second image. The first image is an actor on a set in a costume under lights. The second image is, like Superman himself, drawn. It's done with editing software and not ink and paper, but it is still drawn. This is a cartoon, a drawing, an abstraction, an idea of a person. All the dust and sweat and breath and soul of a human being abstracted into the fantasy of unlimited power. The Joker, Superman, these characters are owned by DC Comics, true. And what mass media companies do with these characters they own the rights to matters, because the world sees them. But what are we really talking about when we talk about comic book movies? We bring out 2 books by 2 very influential theorists of comics. There's a lot of Marvel that I had here. Cinema Purgatorio. These 2. I did put some Calvin and Hobbes in here. These aren't heavy, they're just really hard to balance. Who am I like? I'm kidding, they're heavy. I'm going to show you the first Marvel comic I ever read. It is this, How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way, by Stan Lee and John Buscema. It has been in print since the 70s and has never been out of print. And there's a lot of really great drawing advice in here, great art advice. It shows you a lot of the basics of how a comic is made, and these are the tools we use. This is what a panel is, this is what perspective is. This version is owned and been colored, which is cute. And it includes all of the old stereotypes with it. This is how you draw a man. This is how you draw a woman. This is how you draw, etc. Now, John Buscema is a talented artist, and in part of this, he draws the same scene twice. It shows 2 guys clearly having an argument. One looks older, the other looks younger, and on the first page, this is supposedly the non-Marvel style of drawing comics, and in contrast with the Marvel style. All the same basic beats, except the visual language is more striking, the angles more decisive, the details focused on more. One of the greatest theorists of comics who ever lived, and someone that I will go back to over and over again, is Scott McCloud. In his book Reinventing Comics, in which he talks about the industry around comics, he made a very interesting observation about John Buscema's art. Yet in both examples, the physical relationships are reiterated in nearly every panel, like game pieces assembled for skirmish, always wary of the other guy's position. Both of them are showing the same scene, and the scene is about 2 men in physical relationship with each other. It's a battle. It's men taking up space and showing themselves in physical relation to another. Even when not done in the Marvel style, it's still a Marvel comic. Now, let's get to that word, Marvel. What is in that? Marvel. Air. The word Marvel is a word. It comes from Latin, from mirabilis. Comics fans probably already know the long and sordid history of the word Marvel in comics. Marvel itself started as timely publications, printing the line Marvel Mystery Comics in 1939. Meanwhile, Fawcett Publications introduced a character with the name Captain Marvel.
Shazam!
This led to the 1951 case National Comics Publications versus Fawcett Publications, where the owners of Superman sued the owners of Captain Marvel for copyright infringement. And so Captain Marvel went out of print because it was bought out and sold for parts, and then later reintegrated into the burgeoning DC universe, leaving a space for a bunch of other people to make their own Captain Marvels. There's the famous case in England of a man creating a character named Marvel Man. And that is how we get Alan Moore. Timely had, meanwhile, struggled as Atlas Comics, before officially rebranding as Marvel Comics in 1961. Then their various titles became astronomically popular, introducing new character after new character after new character. In 1967, Marvel Comics debuted an alien named Captain Marvel, knowing full well what they were doing. The result has been a farce of brand warfare, as DC was forced to market the character as Shazam, while Marvel put out character after character after character just to maintain the legal rights to the name Captain Marvel. The current version of the character is the 7th Marvel character to use the name. And I'm going to say something. I'm going to say something that I hope is clear to everyone watching. I hope I only need to say it once, and I hope this is taken in the best possible faith that it can possibly be taken. All of that litigation, all of that bandying back and forth over the word Marvel, none of this is Brie Larson's fault! And I feel like I have to say that because there is an entire ecosystem on YouTube that just wants easy targets and milkable lolcows with all the racist, sexist, transphobic, ableist, homophobic, xenophobic, bullshit Nazi basement politics that come with it. And I do not want any part of that culture. Why lady strong? Lady no strong, lady strong. Lady strong in movie, lady no strong, lady strong. Blah. Lady strong. They're just trying to manufacture outrage against whatever non-male, non-cis, non-heterosexual, anything but the Arno Brecker statues that they so clearly want to look at instead of people.
Yeah, why can't he be standing on the top of a skyscraper looking heroic or something, with the stars and stripes in the background?
But the thing that a lot of people are arguing about, is this really the vibe? You said you wanted to bring back this hopeful Superman. This doesn't look super hopeful to a lot of people.
I wanted the first reveal of Superman to be this glorious fucking stance, maybe flying, maybe hovering, something like that, but looking sad and putting on his boots real slow. Let's go, bro!
It must be frustrating for Hollywood right now that they can spend so much time and money, they can spend years developing a film, and then publish a publicity image that is largely panned by a huge cross-section of the fan base, and as well as that, within minutes or hours, someone on the internet can just throw together a superior interpretation of that same image.
It is so obvious what their thesis is. It is so obvious what they want. It is power. Power is the goal. Power is the framework. Who has power? Who gets power? Who should have power? Who is getting power that they should not have? Power is the all-encompassing thing with which they contextualize the world. And that mindset leads to people only wanting stories about people who can stand over other people and exert their will upon them. Super power. It is a power fantasy. And we all know that fantasy. We all know how the fantasy goes. These fantasies, they flow from and justify a preoccupation with situations of control, submissive behavior, extravagant effort, and the endurance of pain. They endorse two seemingly opposite states, egomania and servitude. The relations of domination and enslavement take the form of a characteristic pageantry. The massing of groups of people, the turning of people into things, the multiplication or replication of things, and the grouping of people things under an all-powerful hypnotic leader figure or force. This dramaturgy centers on the orgiastic transactions between mighty forces and their puppets, uniformly garbed and shown in ever-swelling numbers. Its choreography alternates between ceaseless motion and a congealed, static, virile posing. This art glorifies surrender It exalts mindlessness. It glamorizes death. Oh dear, am I directly quoting someone without citing them? Or am I dropping an Easter egg to one of my other videos where I did use this quote and cited it in full? Can you tell me what essay that's from and in what context it appears? True believers? Speaking of, can we talk about how often religious language shows up in these kinds of discussions? Not just the modern myths. Also talk about movies being faithful to the comics. I mean, that's older than the movies. Superman's fan club had oaths of loyalty, and in Marvel, you belong, you belong, you belong, you belong to the Merry Marvel Marching Society. There is a kind of loyalty and a faithfulness that is expected of these characters. And it's loyalty to a brand. Brand, interestingly, comes from the Dutch for to burn. You know, brand is something you burn on the side of your livestock to mark it as your own. This is my brand of cow. This is my brand of comic. And that's all Marvel is. A brand. A brand that has been burned onto all of its works. And so it's very difficult to talk about any one part of the Marvel empire without talking about all of it. And that trinity of brand and faith and power are the undercurrent of all discussions about these movies. When the faith is in the brand, and the brand is power, and power is backed by faith, it becomes this vortex of insularity where all arrows point back to itself. So if you haven't guessed by now, this is not a video about the top 20 comic book movies of all time. This is a video about how we talk about canonizing movies, how we make lists of movies, how we build the connections in our heads between movies and build the world around it. It's disturbing that the first thing we think of when we think of comic books is the power fantasies that have monopolized that medium, and the power fantasies that are quickly monopolizing another medium. And they did it by using the same pattern as commercially successful in print as it was in film. The medium of comics is filled with so many artists and so much talent that we need to talk about it beyond the Republican and Democratic parties of comics. And do not come at me with voting third party. Jeff Bezos is not the solution. The solution is working horizontally, reaching out rather than looking up in the sky. Finding new characters, creating new characters, supporting those characters once they are created. Now, I'm not saying don't make more superhero stories. Superhero stories have a lot of meat in them, have a lot of great themes that can be explored. But don't defend the integrity of a genre. Genre in French actually is the same as gender, and genre, like gender, is a social construct. It is something with arbitrary features that we have decided are essential to them. Genres are meant to be played with. They are fluid. They are constantly changing. They are always transitional from one form to another. And we should embrace that fluidity. I mean, I thought about putting any one of the MCU films on this list. I could possibly put Black Panther on this list. But Black Panther is the least interesting thing to discuss in the context of Marvel Comics. That is to say, if you put Black Panther in the context of Marvel, follow that path and you get more Marvel. But put in the context of, say, the filmography of Chadwick Boseman, following that path might lead you to his starring role in this adaptation of an August Wilson play. Follow the path set by the Oscar-winning costume designer Ruth E. Carter, and you'll discover how she influenced decades of hip-hop fashion with her work. Or follow the path laid by Black Panther's biggest influence, Afrofuturism. Then you start talking about things like Sun Ra and Brother from Another Planet. The Last Angel of History from the 90s is basically a manifesto for Afrofuturism. And what's more, you don't need me to tell you about Black Panther. You don't need me to tell you about Black Panther. Black Panther is a huge hit. It has fans worldwide. But also, vibranium isn't real. You know what is real? Coltan. Coltan is an ore that contains niobium and tantalum, which are two rare earth metals which are both very important in modern electronics. And that mineral wealth that is in Africa, in the real world, has been extracted for decades if not centuries. And there are actual people that are mining that coltan that are dying in droves right now. And if you want an Afrofuturist movie about a group of coltan miners that found their own commune around coltan and create this techno-utopia, Neptune Frost. Look it up. It's fantastic. It has nothing to do with comics. We can have as many cinematic universes as we want, but at some point we all need to delve into the deep lore of the one universe that we all actually live in. The actual non-cinematic universe. That's a terrible acronym. Or maybe it's a perfect acronym. This universe is filled with people whose faces and bodies and stories will never make it to a big screen. A universe which is diverse, but in fiction is uniform. A universe that we want to be equitable, but is everywhere marked by bias. A universe where all that could be included is, by scorn, by mockery, by the constant policing of culture, is excluded. Fighting for the integrity of a genre means fighting for uniformity, bias, and exclusion. Fighting for art, fighting for the work that people make, fighting for all the things that an art form can be, means joining the fight for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Goddamn, I hope I'm pissing off the right people now. We do not need to meet an arbitrary standard of fidelity to pre-existing works of fiction. We do not need more stories about power, and we do not need to back another brand. Number one is Josie and the Pussycats! This movie rules. It's so good. It's like, yeah, brah, so good. Josie and the Pussycats is the blueprint. Every movie should be like Josie and the Pussycats. Josie and the Pussycats is cinema. Everything that is not Josie and the Pussycats is not cinema. It's that simple. It was directed by two people who haven't done much else, and it was written by Nostradamus.
Girls, I can't tell you how happy I am to be sitting at this table with the Pussyhats.
About 16 years too early. But still, the stuff they do with these characters owned by Archie Comics is groundbreaking. Trend-setting, even.
I still don't understand why you're here.
I'm here because I was in the comic book.
What?
Nothing.
The words of the prophets are written in the screenplay to Josie and the Pussycats. It has one of the greatest comic book villains of all time.
This is what our operation really does.
Blue is the new orange.
This is the epicenter of all trends. We turn your world into one giant TV commercial.
But the best thing about this movie is that it's really for the fans, you know?
Josie and the Pussycats are the best band ever. You're nobody without an Abercrombie & Fitch vintage tee.
They're selling stuff through our music.
There's so many references and allusions and Easter eggs, all these things that, you know, point to a larger universe outside of itself. That's some great world building. That's great cinema. Each little tidbit you find is a reward for people who've devoted so much time and energy to these characters and the story and this universe that you really feel like you want to go out and learn more about these people and the universe that they inhabit and the products they consume.
We found that subliminal messages work much better in movies.
Josie and the Pussycats is the best movie ever.
And what is more comic book movie than that? This video is brought to you by my patrons on Patreon. Joining you gives you access to various things, including an ad-free version of this video, which patrons got to see early, plus deleted scenes from past videos and even a few short musical covers. Thank you for your support. Life to not fascism. pose for a thumbnail. Professional YouTubing. Also, before we go, honorable mentions for best comic book movie. Fritz the Cat, Ricky O, the Story of Ricky, and It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown. Bye!